What I've seen, because I've really lived it, and I've been involved with dozens of governments across the world for 40 years now. Basically, the neocons took over U.S. foreign policy 30 years ago. And it hasn't really mattered whether it's Democrats or Republicans. It didn't really matter whether it was Bush Jr. or Obama or Biden, because there is a real story behind all of this. I happened to be there actually 32 years ago, 33 years ago, because I was an economic advisor to the economic team of Gorbachev, actually. And in 1990, Gorbachev wanted to end the Cold War. He wanted to end the Soviet military alliance, the so-called Warsaw Pact alliance. Germany wanted to reunify, or Helmut Kohl wanted to reunify Germany. And they discussed this, and it was very clear. The US and Germany said to Gorbachev, if you dissolve the Warsaw Pact and the Cold War, and Germany reunifies, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward. Turned out to be a massive lie. In the mid-1990s, the US started the NATO expansion. Very wise people at that time, and I think the wisest of the era was George Kennan, a great historian, scholar, and diplomat of the time, said this is the beginning of the new Cold War. The warnings went completely unheeded. We got to the early 2000s. By the way, Putin came into power pro-European, absolutely wanting normal relations. George Bush expanded NATO to 7 more countries, to the Black Sea, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Slovenia, to the 3 Baltic states. All the time Putin was saying, stop. You're right in our neighborhood. We have national security concerns. Then in 2008 at the Bucharest NATO summit, Bush, over the objections of the Europeans, and European leaders talked to me privately at the time, but they don't talk publicly. And that's how Europe works. The US says what it's going to do, and the European leaders may complain, they may squirm, but they don't explain to their own people what's at stake. But what Bush pushed in 2008 was that NATO would now expand to Ukraine and to Georgia. I don't think that's a North Atlantic country. I don't think that's a NATO country, actually. What you see at play there is this neocon idea of surrounding Russia in the Black Sea, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Georgia. And what our strategists have said for decades is that would basically corner Russia, and Putin said it, don't do this in our neighborhood. And actually there was a NATO-Russia meeting the next day after Bush pushed through this enlargement commitment. And at that NATO-Russia meeting, Putin said to Bush, if you push NATO into Ukraine, we take back Crimea. I tell you that now. That's it. Now there's a pro-Russia, pro-US government. The pro-Russian president was overthrown in their interpretation. They followed up, as they said, Putin seized Crimea. The new government said, we're going for NATO. The US started pouring in billions of dollars of armaments between 2014 and 2021. And now we've been in this for months. It has escalated. At least tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have died in the midst of this. Biden has talked about that, oh my God, we're on a risk of Armageddon. He's trying to think, he said even out loud, what is Putin's off-ramp? Well, Mr. President, I can tell you what the off-ramp is because it's been explained for 32 years. Please do not expand NATO to Ukraine and Georgia, just like we would not like China and Mexico having a military alliance right now. And when Cuba tried that, in the Western Hemisphere back in the early 1960s. The United States invaded with a snap of a finger. Of course, we need to pull back from this path that we're on, but one of the parts of the campaign is to tell us nothing to worry about. No problem. Everything's fine. Zelensky says each day, we're going to push them out of every inch of Ukraine, including Crimea. Well, yeah, but not before nuclear war, you're not going to. And we know that, but we don't say it. And we just don't tell the truth. And this is imperial logic. Imperial logic is you don't have to explain anything. This isn't about democratic governance. This is about imperial logic. But they don't feel any urge to explain any of these issues to us. I know it. I see it because I hear a lot. I see it from different government side. I see the perplexity. I also know in Europe, there's a lot of consternation in European leaders, but they don't say anything. So when the hardliners are in power, they think they can act with impunity because they don't have to explain anything. We learned it from the Brits, by the way. You know, this is British Empire behavior. But in any event, this is what has really also increased this sense of anxiety, because we're told now all the time, it's not just Russia that's the enemy, it is China. And China's the big enemy. Russia's the regional enemy. China's the world threat. And when you hear it from the other side, that's a little bit provocative. And then we have the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, flying to Taiwan. The Chinese are saying, please don't do this. Please don't stir the water. Please keep things down. Like Putin was saying, please don't go to Ukraine with NATO. No, we have the right to do it. We will defend Taiwan. Absolutely endangering Taiwan like nothing else by putting Taiwan exactly into this superpower confrontation the same way is the business of the US government. It creates a narrative about China as the enemy. It creates a narrative about Ukraine as an unprovoked war by an unhinged new Hitler Russian president. It creates a narrative about the virus. And if I could just jump in with one more example of this, you know, pretty interesting who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. One president I know said, if Russia invades, that's the end of the pipeline. And then when asked, well, what do you mean, Mr. President? He says, we have our ways. And then after the pipeline's blown up, the Secretary of State says this is a tremendous opportunity to wean Europe from Russia. Well, what's the narrative? The narrative is, well, Russia did it. And the newspapers say, well, yeah, the US officials say Russia did it. Russia blew up its own pipeline, its own billions of dollars of infrastructure, the pipeline that carries Russian energy to European markets, which was a lot of the point of this, whereas the other side said they were going to do it. So this narrative business, it's really pretty clear, obviously, but I don't think it is so deeply nefarious and evil. I think it is so thoughtless and ignorant and arrogant, and it's a hubris that comes when you never have to explain anything. When every screw up, you just go on. And because we have so many screw ups in American foreign policy, but because not one of them was told honestly, they never have to explain. So I think the arrogance is, all right, so we screw up, so what? Look, who explained the complete disaster of Afghanistan, which, by the way, wasn't just the disaster of pulling out, in this chaotic way. The U.S. went into Afghanistan in 1979. That's almost not even known, except that Zbigniew Brzezinski let us in on this fact a few years ago in an interview, that it was a secret covert operation to fund the Mujahideen, to incite or provoke the Soviet Union to invade. Ah, how clever. 40 years later, Afghanistan is a complete wasteland. But there's no accountability. On the way out, the United States grabbed the $8 billion, the measly $8 billion of their foreign exchange reserves to make sure that there would be no conceivable economy left behind. Or who explained Syria? You know, every day I read Putin is absolutely, unhinged. He went into Syria. Yes, Russia went into Syria in 2015. The United States went into Syria covertly in 2011. In 2012, the US President Obama, signed an order for the CIA to overthrow Assad together with Saudi Arabia. So who explained it? It's not even discussed in American life. So I think what we're seeing is they don't think ahead. This policy, the sanctions policy, is not going to work. The following is not going to work. And the basic logic that you have, that you're going to defeat Putin on the battlefield, that's also not going to work. In the end, this is core security interest for Russia, and they have 1,600 deployed nuclear weapons. So think about it, how this could unfold. But it's not going to unfold where Putin says, oh, sorry, we're going home. It was just a terrible, terrible mistake. And NATO, you're very welcome to come into our next door. It's not going to happen that way. So I don't think they think these things through, because the basic goal is incompatible with reality. The goal of a unipolar US world where 4.2% of the world population runs the show is incompatible with 21st century reality. It fundamentally cannot make sense, and it doesn't. But if you don't have to explain it, it doesn't bother you so much. It's not a political football, it's just a political mistake. And I learned 30 years ago, the main job of a US president is to put the brakes on the war machine. It's really hard because the war machine's always revving. And a sound president, we've had very few, knows how to put the brakes on. And very, very few have done that. Actually, Eisenhower and Kennedy, in their distinctive ways, both did that. They knew to stop wars from going on. Kennedy may have paid with his life for it because his peace initiatives were profoundly unpopular with the CIA and with others, and God knows what happened, but he understood putting the brakes on. But most of our presidents don't. And whether this was Biden's initiative or his naivete, or this is our foreign policy, Mr. President, and you stick with it, whatever it is, getting people to question again what they're being fed. And by the way, people don't have trust, so it's not impossible to get them to think through, but they need the information. They need to understand the story. It's really important, because this machine is running with impunity right now. It does run on secrecy. Everything is, is classified documents, and that's how an imperial state operates. And the more that it's opened up, this is not what the public wants. This is not a war driven by public hate, by the fervor for the war. This is a war driven from the top. NATO expansion wasn't a popular cause. It's a political elite, and even of that, just a pretty small part of the political elite. But it is I'd say the dominant political direction of the U.S. government at the top, but not coming from the American people. So that's actually the hope. It's actually the hope. If these stories break open just a little bit and people say, this is not what we were told. Now, in this, every kind of crazy demagogue can come. That's what is unsettling about highly charged times because they can go from bad to worse, but they can also go from bad to better. And I think that that's what we really need to be pressing for.